Captain Elias Rook runs his gloved hand over the gleaming visor of his helmet as he crouches behind a massive, gnarled root that rises from the phosphorescent soil. A swirl of glowing spores flutters by on a faint breeze that carries a pungent, acidic scent. His breath is shallow. His hazel-green eyes, usually so steady, are brimming with uncertainty. He's tall and powerfully built, with dark brown hair trimmed close to his skull, though a few rebellious strands curl over his brow. The scar that marks his left eyebrow down to his cheek feels tight in the chilly air. His heart thunders in his chest as he checks the perimeter with his rifle. The environment hums with an alien quality. Plants glow. The earth beneath him seems half alive, and somewhere in the distance an unfamiliar creature howls. Stranded on this hostile planet, he can't help but reflect on how he ended up abandoned by his own commanders. He shifts position carefully, mindful of the shifting, bioluminescent moss clinging to his boots. As he does, he clenches and unclenches his fingers in a now ingrained habit, an unconscious attempt to quell the tension that always seizes him at the brink of conflict. He knows he can't stay here much longer. The flora that so helpfully illuminates the terrain could easily betray his location to whatever lurks beyond. The first few days after his unit's betrayal were spent in raw survival mode. Now, with rations dwindling and no sign of rescue, he questions whether any help would come for a pawn so easily discarded. Suddenly, his ear catches a faint ripple of movement. His grip on his rifle tightens, a shape shimmers between two dense clusters of alien ferns, and in that fleeting moment he senses a presence, swift and silent. He barely breathes. He's seen many battlefields, stared down countless foes, but this is different. Something about this presence is calculated, patient. Carefully he stands, eyes scanning the luminous plants that stand nearly as tall as he is. When the figure appears in front of him, he almost pulls the trigger out of reflex. She is tall, nearly his height, yet lean and agile in a way that suggests she was born to move through this environment. Her hair, silver blue like liquefied moonlight, cascades down her shoulders and back. She wears a sleek armor that seems almost organic, melding with her glowing, iridescent skin. He sees her notice the insignia on his uniform, the tattered, half-torn patch that once signified his allegiance. He doesn't know her yet, but her expression twists into unmistakable disdain. Even so, she doesn't strike first. The moment stretches, taut. He can see her chest rise and fall, the faint glow of her markings pulsing in time with what must be her quickened heartbeat. The tension in the air is thick enough to slice through. She speaks in a voice that resonates with surprising depth. Though her face possesses an otherworldly beauty, it's the flicker of light along the bioluminescent lines on her cheekbones and across her brow that ensnares his attention. Her eyes shift in color, a swirl of violet that catches flickers of cyan, like a living nebula in each iris. They lock gazes. The slight tilt of her chin indicates authority, but there's something else beneath the cool facade. Though her accent is strange, she uses a form of standard he can understand. "Lower your weapon, human." Despite the rational part of his mind telling him that this single being might be less dangerous than the planet itself, Rook's soldier instincts balk at surrender, yet he finds himself easing the barrel of his rifle downward, if only slightly. His heart still pounds. "Who are you?" Her bioluminescent markings flicker in annoyance. "I am Princess Sari'ka," she says, her voice trembling only slightly with emotion, "and I have no time for polite introductions." Rook lifts an eyebrow, forcing his expression to remain neutral. "Princess, is it? I'm guessing you're the one behind the guerrilla attacks on our squads?" Her disdain intensifies. "You assume all aggression is unprovoked. Your people came to my world, put my people to the sword, and used my planet as a battlefield for your wars. Even so, I don't have time to kill you right now." He notices that she's scanning the perimeter with the same wary vigilance he himself exhibits. It strikes him that she expects danger at any moment too. Then she surprises him by stepping closer, her posture decidedly non-threatening, though her eyes remain sharp. "I need you alive," she says. "Put your weapon down." He narrows his eyes. "I don't plan to die here either, but you give me one good reason I shouldn't just end this standoff." Before Sari'ka can answer, a sudden roar echoes from deeper in the jungle-like expanse. Something big is moving closer, crashing through vines and thick roots. The brightening flickers of Sari'ka's patterns reveal her alarm. She turns to Rook, features set. "We'll be torn apart if we stay. Follow me or end up in its stomach. Choose." Rook eyes the darkness, the unearthly shriek, and the trembling of the ground beneath them. Once Rook nearly stumbles into a pit that glows an ominous green, but she catches his sleeve, pulling him aside. Panting, they finally halt in a clearing behind a jagged, rocky outcropping, where a cluster of luminescent mushrooms tower overhead like umbrellas. A faint drizzle of glowing condensation drips from their gills. Sari'ka spins around. "Tell me your name, human." He lowers his rifle, scanning for potential threats, then rests the butt of the weapon against the ground. In any other circumstance, he'd rely on the might of his squad, but that's a luxury he no longer has. Reluctantly, he nods, and they break into a run. Sari'ka leads, weaving through bioluminescent branches with uncanny ease. Rook keeps pace, using every bit of his soldier's instinct to match her agility, even though she's far more experienced with this terrain. They scramble between glowing vines and huge spore pods that release neon puffs of dust when disturbed. Captain Elias Rook, formerly of the Terran Vanguard, though if you ask me now, I'm not sure I belong to them anymore. She seems to study him carefully. Her eyes, swirling with new color, examine his posture and the strain in his expression. "You are a soldier, but you speak like a man abandoned. Why are you here, alone?" He scowls, recalling the memory of a high-pitched whistle from their so-called rescue shuttle fading into the distance, leaving him stranded after an ambush. "I was set up by my commanding officers. They never intended to bring me back. I assume they wanted no loose ends from this mission." Her gaze flickers with something akin to sympathy, though it's quickly hidden. She folds her arms over her chest. "Perhaps you and I have more in common than I expected." A screech reverberates again, sounding a bit farther away, but still capable of sending a tremor through the ground. They stand there in tense silence, waiting for any sign that the beast has found them. When the noise recedes, Sari'ka leans in closer to Rook. "You must come with me," she says. "Your people have stolen everything from mine. I am the last of the royal bloodline, and the final hope for my people's survival. I need you, for a specific reason." Rook's brows knit. He's about to demand a clearer explanation, but in that moment he sees genuine desperation in her swirling eyes. Rook notices how Sari'ka's bioluminescent patterns shift in color whenever she's scanning the surroundings, a subtle clue of her heightened focus. She navigates them through thick vegetation until they come upon a sunken area where the roots of an immense tree spread in a circular web. In the center, partially hidden by draping vines, is an entrance to what appears to be an underground chamber. She motions for him to follow her inside. It doesn't lessen his wariness, but it piques his curiosity. "I'm not exactly in a position to decline help right now," he says. "But if this is some trap, you'll die either way if we stay in the open." Her voice trembles on the edge of urgency. "We can talk more if we survive the night." They move together, slipping through the shadows of the alien forest. Beneath the thick trunk, they find a tunnel of smooth, glistening stone that slopes gently downward. Crystals embedded in the walls emit a faint glow, creating ribbons of soft light. The air is cool, and Rook can finally breathe a hint of relief. This is one of our old refuge sites, Sari'ka explains, a safe place to gather resources. We used to hide from your people here. The mention of his people's destructive presence sets his jaw on edge. He can't refute that the Terran vanguard came here, presumably under the pretense of ensuring security, but the reality was far harsher. He sets his rifle down on a rocky ledge, slowly sinking to the ground. Exhaustion seeps through every limb. Glancing at Sari'ka, he expects some new directive, but she seems equally drained. They sit across from each other, the weight of their precarious alliance heavy in the still air. He clears his throat. You said you needed me for something. I want to know why. Despite the fatigue, his voice is firm. Her glowing eyes meet his. I will explain, but you have to promise not to react with violence. He stiffens, confusion flitting across his features. I'll hear you out. She presses her palm to a pattern of fine lines across her collarbone that pulses softly. My people are dying. Those who remain suffer from a depletion of the vital energies we need to reproduce. The processes we once had are contaminated due to the atmospheric toxins unleashed during the war. Our species requires a strong genetic infusion to stabilize what remains of our fertility. We discovered, through our last living scholars, that a human's unique biology might be our only chance. It is. We can't survive otherwise. Rook processes this in stunned silence. There's a mix of pity and alarm swirling in his mind. So, you're telling me you need my DNA or something like that? She dips her head in a slow nod, her cheeks taking on a slightly more luminescent flush, as if the admission is embarrassing. We call it milking. It's a tradition in my people's law, though the direct translation has been lost in time. Humans have the potential to spark a renewal. Your presence here might be the difference between our species vanishing forever or reviving. He rubs the back of his neck, memories of the Terran propaganda claiming the aliens were a threat to humanity drifting through his mind. I'm just one man, though. Her expression sours, her markings flickering in frustration. One is better than none, especially the right one. He doesn't have an immediate answer, and the silence between them hums with unspoken tension. Sari'ka stands, crossing her arms. I know it seems insane, and I admit I despise humans for what they did. But I can't fulfill my duty to my people without your help. If you truly have no loyalty to your commanders who abandoned you, maybe you can find a reason to aid us. Rook closes his eyes for a moment. There's a pang of compassion in his chest. He was abandoned by those who once gave him orders and told him who to kill. Now, confronted by an alien princess who claims she needs him to save her race, he's caught between cynicism and an unexpected urge to do something meaningful. What exactly do you expect of me? He asks quietly. She exhales, the glow around her cheeks fading just a bit. We must survive first. Then we find the other enclaves of my people. We will see how we can use your biology to begin their healing. The details will become clear when the time is right. He opens his eyes and studies her. She looks both regal and fragile in the low, crystalline light, as though the entire weight of her civilization rests on her slender shoulders. He thinks about how alone she must feel, how alone he feels right now. That sense of shared isolation plants a tiny seed of connection between them, surprising and unsettling him in equal measure. He nods once. I'll help you, on one condition. A faint tension creases her brow. Name it. You don't use me like a tool. If we do this, we do it as partners. She hesitates, then extends a slim hand to him. Agreed, Captain Elias Rook. He reaches out, gripping her forearm in a firm, soldierly manner. Their eyes meet. In that moment he feels a strange electric pulse, not just the pressure of her skin against his, but something deeper that sends warmth through his chest. Her bioluminescent markings flicker in what might be surprise. Neither of them comments on it. They simply end the handshake and settle into an uneasy silence. Hours pass in relative calm. Rook dozes fitfully, his back against the stone wall. Sari'ka paces quietly, the glow of her hair trailing behind her. At one point she moves closer and reaches out with a cautious hand. He stirs awake instantly, though he doesn't flinch away. She looks at him, her expression torn. "Are you badly injured anywhere?" He shakes his head. "Minor scrapes, a few bruises, nothing serious." His gaze tracks the swirl of colors in her eyes. "You?" "A few old wounds that never healed properly. But I am strong." She winces slightly, placing a hand on her left side. We push through. He notices a faint stutter in the glowing line across her ribcage. Without thinking, he gently touches that area, and she inhales sharply. There's a tense moment where their eyes lock, and then she draws back, lips parted. The silence that follows thrums with undercurrents of confusion, caution, and something else he can't yet name. They remain that way, separated by inches, but worlds apart in trust. At last she turns, whispering, "Try to sleep. We'll need to move again at dawn." Rook nods, letting the exhaustion finally claim him. His dreams are fraught with images of the war, of his squadmates turning on him, of this luminous princess commanding him to do something he doesn't fully understand. He wakes more than once, heart pounding in the darkness. But she is always near, her silhouette illuminated by the faint glow of the crystals. Each time he sees her watching him, vigilant, as though expecting an attack from outside or from him. Each time he falls back into an uneasy sleep, lulled by the quiet hum of her presence. When the subterranean crystals begin to shift their glow to mimic the planet's daybreak, Sari'ka kneels at his side. "We need to go," she murmurs. He rises, every muscle stiff from sleeping on the stone floor. He picks up his rifle and follows her outside into the dull, early-morning luminescence that seeps through the canopy. The vast tree roots and vines look different in the daytime, glow subdued, shapes more defined. The roar they heard the night before has faded into memory, but neither of them is foolish enough to assume it's gone. They tread carefully. As they proceed, the conversation that was left unfinished returns to the surface of Rook's mind. He can't help but stare at Sari'ka's swift, graceful movements, the way her silver-blue hair glitters with each turn of her head. She might be young, but there's a regal air about her. Something forged by necessity in the wake of whatever cataclysm her people endured. He wonders if she has known only war, much as he has. After traveling in silence for nearly an hour, they pause in a sheltered glade, lined with large, lily-like plants that shift color in gentle waves. Rook takes a sip from his canteen, then offers her some. She eyes it warily at first, then accepts with a small nod. When she brings it to her lips, he notices how her markings shift to a slightly softer glow. Gratitude, perhaps. He exhales, letting the moment settle. "So, you have a plan?" he asks, setting the canteen aside. She wipes her mouth delicately. "My people are scattered. Some have taken refuge in the old catacombs beneath the great ruins. It's half a day's journey east. If there are any survivors who can help us, they're likely there." He recalls the briefing his squad had about the great ruins, a labyrinth of temples and towers that predates human contact. There was mention of advanced alien tech, possibly centuries ahead of Terran technology. It had piqued the interest of many on his side, fueling the conflict. "Will they welcome me, a human soldier?" She frowns. "They have little choice if they want to live. But we'll have to be careful. Not all of my kin share my willingness to adapt." He nods grimly, a wave of apprehension coursing through him. Yet there's also a flicker of resolve. He's chosen to see this through, partially out of survival, partially because it finally feels like a cause that isn't just about conquest. "Lead the way." They make their way east, guided by the patches of shimmering moss that signal safe paths. Occasionally, the ground trembles with the passage of a creature too large to confront. Each time, they either hide or find a route around. During one such detour, they climb a steep incline laced with vines. Rook, with his muscular build, braces himself and helps Sari'ka when the vines give way beneath her weight. She curses under her breath in her native tongue, and he can't suppress a faint smile at the unexpected normalcy of frustration. When they reach the top, she nearly slips again, and he grabs her waist, pulling her upright. For a heartbeat, they stand pressed close. He feels the warmth radiating from her body, sees the swirl of color in her eyes intensify. There's a moment where neither can speak, the tension thick as they cling to each other. A surge of feeling stirs in Rook's chest, surprising him. He's rescued countless comrades, but he's never felt quite like this. A rush of protectiveness, curiosity, attraction. It's enough to make him release her almost abruptly. Her gaze flicks away, and she murmurs a quiet thanks, stepping aside. They continue in strained silence until midday, when they stop to rest amid a cluster of broad-leafed plants that shade them from the sun. Rook's mind chases its own tail, grappling with the growing bond he senses, and the knowledge that they remain strangers, tenuously allied by necessity. As they sit, he flexes his knuckles absently, a sign of nerves that does not go unnoticed by Sari'ka. She tilts her head. "You do that a lot." He glances at her, question plain on his face. "What?" "Your hands, clenching them. Is that how you calm yourself?" He shrugs, letting his hands still. "It's habit. Sometimes I do it without noticing. Years of combat training, stress. It becomes reflex." She nods, reaching up to sweep her silver-blue hair back, though strands still tumble around her shoulders. For a moment, her gaze flickers from the tension in his hands to the scabbed scar near his temple. She appears pensive, as if deciding whether to speak. Eventually, she does. "I have a habit, too. When I'm upset, my markings flicker uncontrollably. My father used to scold me for it, said a princess should never reveal her emotions so readily." Rook exhales, feeling a flicker of sympathy. "Sounds tough, having to hide what you feel." She purses her lips. "It is, but you learn to adapt." She turns her gaze away. "The Terran invasion taught me that if I show vulnerability, I become a target." He dips his head in understanding. "I guess that goes for everyone in a war zone." They lapse into silence, each lost in thoughts too tangled and raw to unravel in a single conversation. Sari'ka eventually stands, indicating it's time to move on. Their trek continues until the sky overhead, visible through breaks in the canopy, shifts to a burnt orange hue, signaling the approach of evening. The great ruins lie ahead, an outline of jagged spires and half-collapsed arches that loom like petrified skeletons of a once great civilization. As they advance, the air takes on a strange hum, an electromagnetic buzz that raises the hair on the back of Rook's neck. Sari'ka explains in a hushed tone that the ruins contain ancient devices still partially active, resonating with energies that even her people barely understand. They slip through a gaping stone gateway etched with alien symbols. Vines coil around pillars carved with graceful shapes that might depict historical events or mythic tales. Broken statues stare mutely at them with chipped, once elegant faces. Rook senses movement. His rifle is up in an instant, but Sari'ka motions for him to lower it. From behind a collapsed archway, a group of lithe figures emerges. Their clothing is worn and tattered, but they share that same ethereal glow in their skin, though dimmer than Sari'ka's. Some are stooped as if in pain, while others eye Rook with outright loathing. A slender, older alien steps forward, head bowed in respect to Sari'ka. "You have returned, Princess," the elder says quietly, though the voice carries a regal note. "We feared the worst when the humans increased their attacks." Sari'ka inclines her head. I found a human soldier, one abandoned by his own. He has agreed to help us. The group bristles. Murmurs ripple through them, and Rook can almost taste the hostility. He sets his jaw, forcing himself not to react. Sari'ka steps closer to the elder, voice calm but firm. Tell everyone to remain back. He is under my protection. The elder's gaze flicks to Rook, measuring him with cold scrutiny. We do need help, the elder acknowledges at last. But trusting a human is dangerous. Sari'ka gestures for Rook to follow her, ignoring the uneasy stares of her people. They lead him through the broken courtyards to a sunken chamber that must once have been an underground sanctuary. Faint light from above illuminates intricately carved walls. The symbols glow in an otherworldly dance whenever Sari'ka passes her hand close. Rook notices how the energy in the air intensifies here, making his skin prickle. This is where we store what remains of our reproductive technology, she says softly. Damaged as it is, the essence of our hope lies here. She turns to him, a certain guardedness in her eyes. I know you agreed to help, but seeing my people's faces, feeling their mistrust, do you still intend to keep your word? He nods, swallowing the dryness in his throat. I do. I've spent my entire life following orders that led to death. This, helping you, it might give me something worthwhile to fight for. She seems relieved, though she tries not to show it. Her markings pulse gently, and for an instant he glimpses a tender vulnerability beneath her regal exterior. We need to find a way to harness what's left of these machines and combine it with your biological material. He steps closer, letting his gaze wander over the strange devices, tubes and consoles that hum faintly with power. This is the milking you mentioned? Her face flushes with a brighter glow, and she nods. The process is more ceremonial among my people, but we no longer have the luxury of tradition. We just need it to work. He sets his rifle aside. Then let's figure it out. Tell me what I can do. Before she can respond, a shout erupts from above, followed by the distinct sound of energy weapons discharging. Sari'ka's eyes widen, and Rook grabs his rifle in one swift movement. They race back up to the surface. The courtyard is in chaos. Flashes of red energy streak through the air, sizzling against stone. At the far edge, Rook sees soldiers in familiar Terran vanguard armor sweeping in from an archway. When the Terran soldiers step forward, he opens fire. 2 drop instantly, the others scattering for cover. He feels no loyalty, no camaraderie with them now, only the certainty that they will kill everyone if he hesitates. One soldier calls out in confusion, "Hold your fire! Identify yourself!" But Rook doesn't answer. He keeps shooting, driving them back. From above, Sari'ka looses a volley of shimmering energy bolts from a weapon that seems grown from her armor. The scattered remains of the alien survivors scramble for cover, outgunned and terrified. A cold rage ignites within Rook. So they came back after all, but not to rescue him. They came to obliterate the last of the alien resistance. Training takes over. He signals for Sari'ka to move to high ground while he positions himself behind a collapsed pillar. She disappears into the shadows, scaling a broken wall with near silent agility. He lines up his rifle with a vantage between the stone blocks. Each shot lands with precision, and the Terran line falters. The aliens, emboldened by Rook's betrayal of his former comrades, join the fray. The air fills with the acrid tang of ionized dust. Sari'ka lands beside Rook after vaulting off a ledge, her chest heaving. She's a formidable presence, poised and deadly. Their eyes meet for the briefest of seconds. He sees gratitude there, and she likely sees his fierce determination to stand beside her. The firefight is short, but brutal. The Terran squad finds themselves pinned between strategic bursts of Rook's cover fire and the quick strikes from alien warriors who blend with the ruins' architecture. Finally, outnumbered and demoralized, they retreat in disarray, leaving a handful of wounded behind. Sari'ka's people approach cautiously to secure the area. Rook kneels by one of the downed Terran soldiers who's still alive, breathing in harsh rasps. The soldier's gaze lifts, confusion etched on his face as he recognizes Rook. You were reported KIA. He chokes on the words. Rook's jaw tightens. I bet I was. He stands, stepping back. If you know what's good for you, get out of here. The soldier, clutching a nasty wound to his side, manages to crawl away. Rook's fists clench reflexively, but he lets the man go. Behind him, Sari'ka approaches, scanning the aftermath. The tension across her features softens, just for a moment, when she looks at Rook. You could have let him die, she murmurs. He shrugs, though it's stiff. I'm not in the business of slaughtering those who can't fight back. She's silent, studying him as if she's seeing him for the first time. Then she gestures to the remains of her people. Some are wounded. A few lie motionless. Her voice trembles with quiet grief. We must tend to ours. He follows her through the rubble, helping gather the wounded and guiding them into the relative safety of the sunken chambers. The hum of ancient machinery envelopes them, punctuated by the whir of console lights. A stale but electric charge drifts in the air, tickling Rook's nose. He leans a hand against one device, feeling the faint vibration. If we're going to do this, we should do it soon. We might not have another chance if the Terran forces regroup. Sari'ka's eyes roam over the various components of her people's technology. Some of these machines are partially functional. The Elder is among the injured, but insists on continuing to direct the survivors. When Sari'ka helps lower the Elder onto a makeshift cot, the old alien's gaze lingers on Rook. There is strength in him, the Elder says softly, though the tone is still edged with a certain reservation. Perhaps you chose wisely, Princess. Sari'ka sets her jaw, choosing not to respond directly. Instead, she rises and motions for Rook to follow her deeper into the underground sanctuary once more. We can attempt an extraction of your genetic material, what you call DNA, and then integrate it into our genetic matrix. She hesitates, color glowing at her cheeks. It will be intimate. He exhales, hardly surprised anymore, though the reality of it sets his nerves on edge. Tell me what to do. I'm not exactly squeamish, but let's just say this is new territory. She gives a curt nod, though the flicker of her markings betrays her nerves. There is a chamber in the back, a specialized device that, in our ancient times, was used to help with fertility, or so the records say. You would have to release your essence there. My presence is required to ensure the device calibrates properly. A tension crackles between them, but neither flinches. This is, after all, why they joined forces. He steels himself. Lead the way. In the back, they find a smaller room where a large apparatus of curved organic metal design stands, dotted with flickering lights. The lines etched into it match the patterns on Sari'ka's skin. She taps a console, and with a low hiss the device flickers to life. An orb at its center glows, sending pulsing waves of light across the floor. Rook sets his rifle aside, then removes his gloves. He can feel his pulse pounding in his ears. The entire situation feels surreal. He's been in countless dangerous missions, faced death more times than he cares to count, yet standing beside an alien princess, about to engage in a procedure that merges their biology, rattles him like nothing else. Sari'ka's voice is gentle. You should remove your armor. The device needs skin contact to read your body's signatures. He nods, stripping down to his undershirt and pants, acutely aware of her eyes on him. The orb in front of him intensifies its glow, scanning him with a soft beam of light that makes the hairs on his arms stand on end. Sari'ka stands behind him, one hand brushing his lower back. He nearly jolts at the contact. "Relax," she says, though her tone trembles slightly. "Let the device read your vitals." He inhales deeply. The beam sweeps up and down, the console lights flashing in a sequence that might indicate calibration. She too removes parts of her sleek armor until only a minimal underlayer clings to her form. It's made of a thin, shimmering material that seems to respond to her body's natural glow. Her breathing is a little ragged. The closeness of the space, the hum of the device, and the gravity of what they're about to do weigh heavily on them both. She gestures for him to step onto a small platform. He does, placing his hands on two curved projections. Sari'ka's other hand moves to the front of the device, adjusting controls. A soft hum envelops Rook, lulling him into a kind of half-trance. Warmth spreads across his torso and lower body, not entirely unpleasant but undeniably intimate. She steps closer, pressing her chest lightly against his back as she adjusts a dial near his hip. He can feel her heart beating. Then, with a tremor in her voice, she explains what happens next. The device will stimulate the necessary response in your body to produce what we need. I must remain linked to ensure it matches our genetic frequencies. You must focus on letting go. His breath catches in his throat, even as the waves of light shift in color from pale blue to a deeper violet. The platform beneath his feet vibrates with a rhythmic pulse. There is a sudden rush of warmth through him, and he grips the projections more firmly, forcing his shoulders to relax. Sari'ka's body presses closer. He can smell her faint, sweet scent, feel the flutter of her breath against his shoulder. Time blurs. He is dimly aware that this is beyond a simple medical procedure. The lines between duty, biology, and an undeniable sensual current fuse. The hum deepens, pulsing in harmony with his heartbeat. He fights to maintain control, but the device, guided by her adjustments, coaxes a reaction from him. His vision swims with the glow, his mind drifting somewhere between alarm and surrender. Sari'ka's soft whisper at his ear, "Let it happen." He exhales shakily. The device intensifies. In that moment, he experiences a wave of pleasure that floods his senses, strong enough to elicit a sharp gasp. He clenches his jaw, feeling heat course through every nerve. His eyes squeeze shut. The warmth cradles him, grows to a crescendo, and then with a final surge dissipates into a soft hum. He sags against the console, breath ragged, sweat beading on his forehead. She steps back, touching a panel that causes the lights to shift once more. "It's done," she says softly, eyes avoiding his. Her markings flash in brilliant patterns, revealing her own tumult of emotions. She checks a small reservoir at the base of the device. A pale, glowing fluid swirls within. "We have it." He stumbles off the platform, pulling his undershirt down, thoroughly unsettled yet also strangely relieved. The aftershocks of that intense moment linger in the air, and he tries to steady his racing heart. His mouth is dry. She stands there, eyes lowered, the container of fluid in her hands. She seals it with a device that flickers with a faint beep. Silence cloaks them. Words would only highlight the strangeness of what just happened. Finally, she clears her throat, gathering her armor pieces. "We must bring this to the central chamber, where we'll combine it with the genetic matrix. Then hopefully we can save those who still have a chance." He nods, still unable to meet her eyes for longer than a moment, without feeling a confusing surge of emotion. They dress in silence, armor plates clicking back into place. The device hums behind them, the air still thick with the remnants of a charged intimacy. When they emerge from the smaller chamber, the corridor feels colder, less suffocating, yet the echo of that moment hangs between them like a shimmering thread. They deposit the container of Rook's genetic material in the central chamber. Several of Sari'ka's people watch warily, but no one speaks. The elder, propped up by two attendants, observes the process. A few uneasy glances are cast in Rook's direction. He stands near the perimeter of the group, scanning for potential threats, while also wrestling with a torrent of thoughts. Sari'ka operates the ancient consoles, feeding the container's contents into a cylindrical apparatus that whirs to life. The glow intensifies, bright filaments weaving inside. Eventually a gentle chime sounds, and a smaller hatch opens, revealing vials of luminescent liquid. Her markings light up with relief. She turns to her people. "We have what we need to begin healing our bloodlines. If we can find a secure location to nurture those of childbearing age, we can ensure our survival." A cautious cheer ripples through the group. Faces that were etched with despair now shine with a flicker of hope. The elder inclines their head toward Rook. "Strange times indeed, that our future might be linked to a human. Yet we owe him a debt." Rook remains silent, uncertain how to respond to the fleeting gratitude from those who so clearly distrust humans. Instead, he returns his focus to Sari'ka. She steps away from the console, gaze finding his. For a moment, they exchange a silent understanding. What occurred between them was necessary, but it was also something more. Neither knows how to fully articulate it. In the hours that follow, the survivors begin preparations for a relocation. Word has it that the Terran forces might be regrouping, and it's only a matter of time before another assault. Rook assists in barricading entrances, moving supplies and comforting wounded. Sari'ka is often at his side, directing activities or offering insight into her people's technology. Each brush of her hand against his arm, each instance of their gazes meeting, sparks an electric awareness that they both attempt to mask in front of the others. At last, night falls again, the sky visible through crumbled ceilings. Despite the day's momentous events, Rook can't find rest. He sits against a stone wall in a secluded corner of the chamber, running a hand over his short, dark hair. Distantly, he hears the low buzz of conversation among the aliens who gather around small fires for warmth. He wonders what his life would look like now if he'd never come to this planet. Sari'ka slips from the shadows, her silver-blue hair catching the flicker of torchlight. She sits beside him, close enough that he can sense the gentle glow of her skin. Neither speaks for a long minute. She exhales, the tension in her posture softening. "I should thank you," she begins quietly, eyes lowered. "You saved us, twice now. Once by offering your essence, and again by fighting off your own people." He shakes his head. "They're not my people anymore. Maybe never were. As for what happened with the device, you don't owe me thanks for that." She lifts her gaze, those shimmering eyes reflecting an undercurrent of vulnerability. "It was not easy for me to trust a human in such a way. I know we both felt something in that chamber." He draws in a breath, letting it out slowly. "It was intense. More than I expected." Her bioluminescent markings flicker, and she rests a hand lightly on his. "Our bodies connected through the device. It wasn't just a medical procedure. Our energies linked in that moment. It's part of our ancient rites, even if we used a more mechanical method." He feels the warmth of her touch. A swirl of emotion floods him, stirring in his chest. He realizes that she isn't simply an ally or a mission partner. The bond they forged might have begun as necessity, but it's evolving into something deeper, something alive between them. It scares him as much as it intrigues him. She leans closer, tentatively. He shifts to face her, and before he can second-guess himself, he reaches out and brushes a strand of her silver-blue hair behind her ear. Her eyes flutter shut at the contact, her markings pulsing softly. He feels his heart pound, recalling that electric moment of closeness they shared earlier. They drift nearer, their lips meet in a cautious, searching kiss. He savors the softness of her mouth, the faint taste of something otherworldly, the exotic warmth of her luminous skin. She presses into him, her bioluminescence brightening. The moment stretches, charged with relief, desire, and something almost reverent. When they break apart, breath mingling, she whispers, "Elias." It's the first time she's called him by his first name. Her voice trembles with longing. "I know I demanded your help before we even understood each other, but now, I don't want this to be just duty." He cups her cheek, tipping her face up so he can see her eyes. "It's not duty," he says, the words weighted with honesty. "I want to stand by you because it feels right. Maybe that's crazy after everything that's happened, but I can't pretend otherwise." She exhales, brushing her thumb across his scar. "It's not crazy. We've both lost so much. Maybe we've found something in each other that we thought was gone forever." They remain that way, their foreheads gently touching, breathing in each other's presence. The low crackle of distant fires and the hum of alien technology fade into the background. In the space of that quiet intimacy, they discover a tenderness that neither expected to find amid the rubble of conflict. They slip away from the makeshift camps, seeking a private alcove beyond the main chamber, where fallen columns and half-collapsed walls form a secluded niche. The glow from her skin illuminates the ancient runes etched into the stone. Here they give themselves to the pull of desire that's been simmering. Their kisses deepen, hands exploring, with a mixture of urgency and reverence. Where her armor parts, he trails light touches across the bioluminescent patterns, eliciting soft gasps. She tugs at his equipment, unfastening the rigid plates, letting them clatter softly onto the ground. Their breaths tangle, and he's caught in the intoxicating fusion of her warmth, the luminous glow that reacts to every brush of his skin. She murmurs his name again, voice trembling with an intense mix of want and vulnerability. He responds with kisses along her jaw, drawn to the thrum of her pulse beneath her shimmering skin. She arches against him, their bodies sliding into an entwined embrace. Time slows, the urgency of the outside world receding. All that matters is this moment, the shared heat, the unspoken confessions in each other's eyes. As they sink onto a makeshift bedding of cloth and partially ruined tapestries, they exchange whispers, half-formed promises, assurances that they've found solace, though neither says the exact words. Fears linger in the corners of their minds, but for now, they hush them with the closeness of their bodies, letting desire carry them into a warmth that transcends guilt or doubt. They allow themselves to be fully present, drifting from gentle exploration into a passionate crescendo that feels both tender and wildly alive. Her markings pulse in waves that match his every movement, her breath hitching whenever he finds a particularly sensitive spot along her neck or the curve of her waist. Their voices mesh in soft cries that dissolve into kisses, every gesture speaking of a bond that grows stronger with each shared heartbeat. At last, when the tension peaks and then subsides, they lie entwined, their bodies slick with sweat. She rests her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat gradually slow. He holds her close, pressing his lips to the top of her head, fingers idly tracing the swirling lines of her glowing patterns. Neither speaks for a while, content in the hush of post-intimacy. When she eventually lifts her gaze, her cheeks are flushed and her eyes glisten with something akin to awe. He gives her a faint smile, still trying to catch his breath. The words that come feel as though they've been waiting to be spoken. "I never thought I'd feel something like this again." Her voice wavers with raw honesty. "Neither did I." They share a lingering kiss, one that is soft and full of new understanding. They know the war still rages beyond these walls. They know the next challenge looms in the near future. But in this pocket of time, they've found more than an alliance or mutual survival. They've touched a tenderness that transcends species, bridging the divide with a rare and fragile trust. Morning finds them nestled in that same alcove, partially dressed, their arms twined around each other. The faint glow of her skin has subsided to a gentle luminescence, but it brightens again when she stirs and finds his gaze upon her. Working together, they rally the alien survivors who can fight and organize an evacuation plan for those too weak to withstand another battle. Rook devises a tactical approach using the architecture of the ruins as natural choke points. Sari'ka coordinates the stealthy vantage points her kin excel at. Every step of the plan involves both of their strengths, his strategic mind, her familiarity with the terrain and the technology. They reluctantly separate, dressing and preparing to return to the makeshift camp. The elder and the others will undoubtedly need guidance. The Terran forces won't stay away for long. They emerge to find a tense hustle in the courtyard. Scouts have reported Terran movements nearby, more soldiers, more heavily armed. Rook grimaces, shoving the last remnants of personal reverie aside. There's a job to do. Sari'ka's expression hardens into the determined mask of a princess and warrior. As dawn gives way to midday, the Terran soldiers appear on the horizon, an ominous line of armored transports gliding across the broken landscape. Rook stations himself atop a crumbled tower with a vantage that allows him to spot their approach. At his side, Sari'ka crouches behind a chunk of carved stone, her energy weapon cradled in her slender arms. She glances at him, determination lighting her face. "Are you ready?" He exhales. "Let's do this." The enemy forces advance, but this time the aliens are prepared. Traps have been set in the labyrinthine corridors, energy-based tripwires that neutralize or disorient the Terran squads. Snipers, both alien and Rook himself, pick off vulnerable targets. Sari'ka leads a stealth unit that harasses the flanks with hit-and-run attacks. The battle rages for what feels like hours. The ruins thunder with the crash of explosives, the whine of energy discharges, and the shrieks of wounded on both sides. Rook's heart hammers as he coordinates through stolen Terran comm devices, feeding false intel to confuse the invaders. Sari'ka's people, once cornered and desperate, fight with renewed vigor. They have a future to protect now, a real chance at survival. In the midst of the chaos, Rook spots a Terran commander rallying his troops, a figure in advanced armor, barking orders that echo over the courtyard. The commander is pushing forward, unafraid of the casualties. Rook realizes that if this commander isn't stopped, the aliens will be overwhelmed. He signals to Sari'ka, and she nods. Together, they descend from the tower, weaving through rubble and fallen statues until they flank the Terran position. The Terran commander spots them, face contorting with anger. "Traitor!" the commander bellows at Rook. "You'll pay for this!" Rook advances, meeting the commander in the center of a crumbled courtyard. The commander's armor is state-of-the-art, capable of absorbing most standard shots. But Rook is well aware of its weaknesses. He ducks the first swing of the commander's powered gauntlet, rolls to the side, and fires at an exposed servo near the left shoulder. Sparks fly. Sari'ka leaps from cover, moving with breathtaking speed. Her hair flashes like a silver comet as she launches herself at a squad. Her energy weapon slices through one soldier's armor and she ducks beneath another's wild swing, launching a spinning kick that knocks the attacker to the ground. Meanwhile, Rook advances under covering fire, taking out two more soldiers with precise shots. The thunder of his pulse rifle echoes in tandem with the hiss of alien energy arcs. The commander staggers, but recovers quickly, launching a brutal punch. Rook partially blocks with his rifle, which shatters from the impact. Before the commander can finish him, Sari'ka dives in with a sweeping strike of her energy blade that glances off the advanced armor, damaging the chest plate. The commander roars in pain, turning to face her. Rook seizes the moment to draw his sidearm, a heavy-caliber pistol. He aims for the breach in the chest plate's plating. The commander tries to pivot away, but it's too late. Rook pulls the trigger, and the bullet punches through the compromised armor. The commander collapses with a guttural gasp. A hush falls over the courtyard as the last of the Terran troops realize their leader is down. Some attempt a desperate push, but the aliens press in, surrounding them. Realizing the battle is lost, the Terrans retreat in disorganized waves, leaving their commander's body behind. No second wave appears on the horizon. For now, the invasion is repelled. An exhilarating sense of triumph surges through the survivors. They gather in the broken courtyard amid dust and flickering fires. The elder stands, leaning on a makeshift cane, surveying the aftermath. Though the cost is high, many aliens lie injured or dead. The victory is undeniable. For the first time since the war began, the aliens have successfully driven back the Terrans. Sari'ka, breathing hard, meets Rook in the center of the ruins. Dust clings to her hair, and her cheeks are streaked with sweat, but her eyes glow with fierce pride. He reaches for her, pressing his forehead to hers in a gesture that conveys relief, admiration, and something far stronger. She closes her eyes, her markings pulsing gently. Around them her people begin to cheer, not a raucous victory chant, but a solemn, relieved acknowledgement that they live to see another day. In the quiet that follows, Sari'ka laces her fingers through his. "We've done it. We've driven them away." He nods, still catching his breath. "We have." Her eyes glisten with emotion. "Now we can rebuild. Our children, our future, won't have to inherit this endless war." He cups her cheek. "I want to help you, for as long as I can. If you'll have me, I'd stay here and see this through." She leans into his touch. "My people will need time to accept a human in our midst. But in you, I see more than just a soldier, or even an ally. I see," her voice falters, but her eyes speak volumes. "I see a future." He presses a tender kiss to her forehead, letting that single gesture convey the depth of his feelings. They've shared more than enough words. Their actions speak louder. Around them, the survivors begin to organize, tending to the wounded, salvaging what can be salvaged. The threat is gone, but the true work of restoration lies ahead. Later that evening, in a chamber illuminated by a soft, bioluminescent glow, they find a quieter moment together. Sari'ka tends to a cut on Rook's shoulder, carefully cleaning and dressing it. He winces a little, but the warmth in his eyes outweighs any physical discomfort. She finishes and lingers close, her fingertips tracing along his collarbone. He catches her hand, entwining their fingers. "Thank you," he murmurs, "for trusting me, for everything." She shakes her head gently. "We stand here because we trusted each other. No one could have done it alone." Their gazes lock, and in that small alcove, they share yet another intimate moment that transcends words. A hush falls as they embrace, lips seeking the comfort of one another. The familiarity of her taste and the gentle press of her body against his send warmth flooding through his chest. Her hair drapes around them, the silver-blue strands catching the glow of her markings. She deepens the kiss, her arms sliding around his neck, and he pulls her closer by the waist. This time, when they lower themselves onto a pallet of soft linens scavenged from the ruins, there is no urgency of war overshadowing them. The planet feels momentarily peaceful, as though the land itself grants them a reprieve to savor the connection they've forged. Their touches are slow, deliberate, a discovery that unfolds with delicate exploration. She gasps when his hand cups the small of her back, pressing her body flush against his, and he feels his pulse spike in response. Their breathing intensifies with each passing second. He peppers gentle kisses along her neck, careful of the bruises from earlier battles. She arches beneath his lips, hands threading through his hair. Her bioluminescent patterns shift into rhythmic waves that glide across her skin, a dance of passion that seems to mirror her heartbeat. He finds himself entranced by the interplay of light and shadow across her body. Every caress, every whispered word draws them deeper into a realm of shared vulnerability and undeniable desire. They surrender to it, letting the moment swell like a rising tide. Their previous union was fueled by necessity and adrenaline. Now, every touch is a conscious choice, a deliberate affirmation of the bond they share. They move in tandem, an unspoken language flowing between them, culminating in a poignant fade of awareness into pure sensation. When release comes, it arrives with a quiet, powerful pulse, leaving them breathless and clinging to each other. Afterward, as they lie side by side, the slow rise and fall of their chests in sync, she brushes a hand over his cheek. Her expression is resolute, yet tender. I was born a princess, tasked with preserving a legacy. Now I am choosing a new path, for myself and for my people, with you. He draws her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. Then we face the future as one. She nestles against him, her hair cascading over his shoulder, and he wraps an arm around her. Outside, faint noises of reconstruction efforts drift on the air. They share a comfortable silence, simply content in the knowledge that they've found solace and purpose in each other's arms. Morning arrives with a renewed sense of resolve. In the days that follow, they receive word that the Terran forces have completely withdrawn from the sector. Perhaps the cost was too high, or new orders have diverted their attention. Whatever the reason, the planet's surface finds a fragile peace. Rook continues to assist in the reorganization of the alien survivors, teaching them how to use captured Terran tech to augment their own. Teams of survivors gather debris, patch up ancient walls, and set up rudimentary defenses. Others prepare to journey beyond the ruins, hoping to find more scattered members of their species. Rook works alongside them, hauling stones and offering what knowledge he has of survival tactics. Once or twice, someone glares with residual distrust, but most have seen him fight, bled by their side. Sari'ka's open acceptance of him serves as a shield for his presence. Sari'ka and the Elder preside over the first official ceremony in the ruins, during which the newly processed genetic vials are distributed to a handful of volunteers among the alien population. Hope blossoms in the battered community. Whispers circulate that the old line, once thought doomed, may yet produce children who carry the combined heritage of alien and human resilience. For the first time in Sari'ka's life, she envisions a tomorrow beyond war and desperation. One evening, after overseeing repairs in the underground sanctuary, Sari'ka finds Rook standing on a high parapet that overlooks the alien forest, now quiet under a tapestry of unfamiliar stars. She approaches softly, her footfalls nearly silent, and slips her hand into his. He laces their fingers together, gaze still on the horizon. "You thinking about leaving?" she asks, her voice subdued. He turns to her, a slow shake of his head. "No, I'm thinking about how I spent my entire life believing I was only good at one thing. Then I came here, and everything changed. I'm not the same man who landed on this planet." She nods, resting her head on his shoulder. "Nor am I the same princess. Because of you, I learned there can be more to living than fulfilling an inherited duty." They stand in companionable silence for a long time, simply taking in the beauty of a night sky untainted by war. At last, he tilts her chin up, brushing a kiss over her lips. She smiles, radiant and confident, her markings glowing in soft waves that reflect her contentment. "We should go in," she murmurs. "We're holding a feast of sorts, whatever we can scrounge together, for those who survived. Will you join me?" He offers a small grin, warmth in his hazel-green eyes. "I'd go anywhere with you." She leads him back inside, where a modest gathering has formed around a central fire. The survivors greet them with cautious smiles, some bowing slightly to Sari'ka, others nodding respectfully to Rook. Food is scarce and simple, strange tubers roasted over open flames, herbal drinks brewed from the local flora. But there is a shared pride in survival that makes the meal taste richer than any banquet. The elder rises, beckoning Sari'ka to stand with them in front of everyone. Sari'ka hesitates before reaching for Rook's hand. She pulls him forward too and murmurs, "Stand with me." The elder addresses the group in their melodic language, then switches to a form of standard for Rook's benefit. "We honor the union that has granted us hope. Princess Sari'ka, through her bond with this human warrior, has shown us that cooperation can save us, even at the brink of extinction." There is applause, albeit quiet, but sincere. Rook shifts uneasily under the attention, not used to being in a position that isn't purely militaristic. Sari'ka squeezes his hand, and he looks down at her, feeling a surge of protectiveness and pride. When the elder finishes, Sari'ka turns to him, her voice clear despite the emotional tremor beneath. "I once demanded your help as a last resort. You offered more than I could have dreamed. You fought for us, bled with us, and ultimately became a part of us. My people, our people, owe you an unpayable debt. But more than that, I owe you my heart. If you wish it, stay by my side, not out of obligation, but because our bond is real." His throat tightens, and for a moment he can't speak. He sees the way her eyes shine, how the swirling patterns of color in her irises reveal her emotions more than words could. Slowly, he lifts her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I came here with no place in the universe. Now I have one, by your side. I'm not going anywhere. If you'll have me, then I'll do my best to be worthy of you." Her cheeks flush with that beautiful glow, and she steps closer, slipping her arms around his neck as he rests his hands on her waist. The crowd murmurs, and a few cheer softly, acknowledging the moment of truth. Sari'ka leans up, and they share a kiss in front of everyone, a testament to the new union of their worlds. In the days and weeks that follow, the transition to a rebuilding phase begins in earnest. Sari'ka, once a princess of a dying people, now leads them as a monarch with hope. Rook helps coordinate everything from security details to agricultural planning, lending expertise he learned during his time in countless hostile environments. The technology they salvage, combined with the Terran equipment left behind, gradually reactivates some of the ancient systems in the ruins, creating a sustainable environment for the survivors. As time goes on, new enclaves arrive, drawn by rumors of a princess who has found a cure for their dwindling numbers. They bring additional knowledge, and the first successful gestations using the combined genetic approach are reported. Sari'ka's people rejoice, hailing it as the dawn of a new era. Late one afternoon, Sari'ka and Rook stroll through a hidden courtyard, once choked with debris, but now cleared and blooming with fluorescent flowers whose seeds survived the war. She leans her head on his shoulder as they walk, her silver-blue hair shimmering. He points out small sprouts pushing through the soil, and she bends to touch them with something like wonder. They pause near a carved fountain that once likely spouted water in a graceful arc. Now it only serves as a home to moss and creeping vines. Sari'ka runs her fingertips over the etched designs, her expression distant. "I used to wonder if my people would vanish without leaving a trace." He slips his arm around her waist. "They won't. You're ensuring that." She smiles, turning into his embrace. "We are ensuring that. Our world is healing, slowly. We still have so far to go, but at least we know we have a future." He tilts her chin up, searching her eyes. "And you? Are you happy, princess?" She kisses him softly, her voice nearly a whisper. "I am. More than I thought possible. Though I think princess might be an outdated term now that we're forging a new society." He gives a soft chuckle, brushing a hand down her cheek. "Then what do I call you?" She laughs, a warm sound that echoes against the ancient stones. "You'll figure something out." They remain together by the fountain, content to dwell in the hush of the moment. When the night sky finally deepens, spangled with foreign constellations that Rook has started to recognize, They retire to the sanctuary, where they first performed the milking procedure. Now, it has been transformed into a place of reverence and renewal, where new families gather under the guidance of the ancient machines, but in a corner draped with woven tapestries and illuminated by gently pulsing crystals, they have carved out a private space. The sun descends on the horizon, painting the sky with bold strokes of orange and violet reflected in the luminous patterns of the planet's flora. In that tranquil glow, they share a tender embrace, their eyes meeting in a mutual promise to stand by each other, to nurture the new life sprouting from the ruins, to protect this fragile hope for as long as they both live. They're wrapped in each other's arms beneath an alien sky. They find their final moment of consummation, a slow, deliberate union that speaks not just of desire, but of commitment. They shed their clothes and press against each other, exchanging whispers of longing and devotion. Their bodies fuse in a dance that is as old as sentient life itself, yet simultaneously new to them, forging a bond that transcends the boundaries of species. Their breaths hitch in synchronized rhythms, the glow of her markings swirling around them in mesmerizing patterns. He murmurs her name like a prayer, and she cradles his face, gazing into his eyes with unguarded warmth. When they reach that final peak, time seems to shatter into a stillness filled only by the sound of their hearts and the warmth of their shared breath. Afterward, they lie entwined, the warmth of their mingled sweat cooling in the gentle wash of crystal light. She rests her head on his chest, listening to the steady drum of his heart. He tangles his fingers in her hair, pressing a lingering kiss to her temple. "If I ever doubted my place here," he murmurs, "I don't now." She tightens her arms around him in response, unable to find words equal to the magnitude of her feelings, so she settles for silence, letting the closeness speak for itself. Outside, the planet's nightlife stirs in gentle calls and whispers, but the threat of war seems distant, overshadowed by the promise they've built together. In the weeks that follow, no Terran ships appear in the skies. Scouts confirm that the planet is no longer under siege. Sari'ka's people carefully expand their territory, restoring sections of the ruin into habitable spaces. Rook helps train volunteer guards to protect these settlements from dangerous wildlife and any potential incursions. Each passing day cements the cooperative spirit forged in blood and hope. At last, the elder calls for a final gathering, a celebration of victory and a solemn farewell to those lost. It's held in the great central plaza beneath a newly reinforced dome of semi-translucent material that Sari'ka's engineers salvaged from old Terran outposts. Hundreds gather, aliens once scattered across the planet, now united in a single purpose. By flickering torchlight and shimmering lanterns, Sari'ka stands on a raised dais, Rook at her side. She speaks of the hardships endured, of the lives lost, and of the determination that carried them to this day. She recounts how a human soldier, once an enemy, became the unexpected key to their survival. Her voice breaks at one point, recalling the old hatreds and how easily they might have destroyed any chance for reconciliation. But then she smiles, turning to Rook, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "What we have built here is a promise for tomorrow," she says. "For our children, and for every life that will spring from this union of two species who once met only on the battlefield. Let this day mark the end of an old, bitter chapter and the beginning of a new story, one in which we learn from our mistakes and nurture each other's strengths." The applause that follows is no longer uncertain or grudging. It's genuine, rippling through the crowd like a collective sigh of relief. Rook feels a lump in his throat, hardly believing he's standing here as a symbol of hope for a people his own had once sought to eradicate. He clasps Sari'ka's hand, and she squeezes back, the mutual understanding in their glance all that needs to be said. After the ceremony, they share a quiet moment, away from the throng of well-wishers. She slips her arms around him, pressing her cheek to his chest. He runs his fingers through her hair, whispering, "So, princess, what now?" She tilts her head to look up at him, eyes gleaming. "Now we live. We build the future together. You've already chosen to stay, and my people in time will accept you fully. Then, who knows?" He bends to kiss her, slow and full of warmth. "I like the sound of that." They stand there, the heart of the ruins turned into a beacon of rebirth, the echoes of war replaced by the gentle hum of new beginnings. In this final moment, they are certain that no more battles remain to be fought here, no more surprises waiting to ambush them. They have forged their path and found each other despite every obstacle. Hand in hand, they move away from the dais, stepping into the throng of survivors who offer them smiles and murmured blessings. This is the end of one journey and the start of another. But no longer do they gaze forward in fear or uncertainty. Their bond is sealed, their hearts aligned, and their commitment both to each other and to the people they now protect is absolute. Though the galaxy is vast, for now their world is whole, their destiny shared, and their story complete.